Hello, this is saxophonist Antonio Parker, and this is a conversation in jazz, where we are promoting jazz through telling the stories. Today, we are presenting part 3 of our 3-part interview with trumpeter, jazz historian, and author, Mr. Muneer Nasser. We ask you to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so we can let you know when we are posting another video or going live. We also ask you to donate to our Cash App in order to support the channel and help us to produce future videos. Our Cash App is $Jazzology101. That's $Jazzology101. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the video. We're back. This is a conversation in jazz with brother Muneer Nasser. Muneer.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about your father, bassist, the great bassist, Mr. Jamil Nasser. I had the honor of meeting him when you graduated from Howard University.
1992.
1992. And man, both of y'all were proud. I mean, you were just happy because I know the struggles that you... And I could see the joy in your face. And
almost 7 years. That took me six and a half years.
And so I heard about and y'all kind of favor your dad. Y'all, so it was great meeting him. And then I got to hear him play. Where was that at?
That was at the Baltimore Museum of Art.
Yeah, who was Mayhap? Was that Harold
George Coleman, Harold Mayburn. My father and the drummer they were using at that time was Mike Taylor from London.
Man. And I'm glad I'm glad I got to
I'm surprised they weren't down here more often, man. They should have really been in this area more often.
Yeah.
Because that group, they played through the keys, fast tempos. I mean, you ask anybody from that time, an average young person couldn't get up there with them, just their energy. They would blow you off with those fast tempos and stuff like that.
So what would you like the world to know about your father?
Wow. Dang. Many things. You could find the details
without getting on,
in the book.
Some general stuff.
But in addition to being a fantastic musician, very serious about spirituality, very disciplined, very serious about Islam. Went to the mosque, prayed every day. That was first. He was an advocate for education. Mm-hmm. He always said that he wished that he had completed his education. He went to school for 3 years at Arkansas A&M and N. And so he was an advocate for education, a humanitarian. He would help people, even on the street. I remember being in Harlem with him. He was collecting riddance. Like, little kids would come up and give him these, like, dandelions that died. He would give them $2.
Wow.
I remember musicians standing outside. And I'm like, what is he doing? And he said, well, he's down on his luck, and he knows if he see my name in the paper, I'm good at least for $20 or $30.
Wow.
So he would help you. A young musician, he would sit down, talk to you. Not go hide in the back, or chase some chick during the break. He would sit down and talk to you and tell you about the music.
And reading through the book, I noticed, although he was a side man, playing bass with a lot of great artists, he garnered a lot of respect from his peers. I mean, they loved, they loved him.
Yes.
And respected him, and he was a leader amongst his peers.
Yes.
Can you expound on that?
Well, see, at a certain point, my father just wanted to explore his ability to organize concerts, to work with the union, to be the president of the Jazz Foundation, which he was for like 5 years, from 1990 to 95. Mm-hmm. There were a lot of things he wanted to do, but when you're in somebody's band, as a sideman, they're going to keep your head in their game.
Gotcha.
You'll have a lot of rehearsals. Mm-hmm. You got to travel. And so he felt like that he could do more than just play, as a sideman in someone's band. And so, he led a lot of these different initiatives, like particularly with the Jazz and Justice, with the Musicians Union. Mm-hmm. Do you know that there was a time where if the musicians had paid, and the clubs had paid into the pension fund, that they would have had enough money to retire? Bob Crenshaw got $10,000 a month before he died because he played 20 years on Sesame Street.
Wow.
And my father could have gotten $4,000 or $5,000 a month if they had known about it.
Wow.
And all the groups he was playing with were paying into the pension fund, but they kept it a secret.
Wow.
You know, and it was there since 1959, and they just found out. And then the clubs, to this day, we talking about saving the clubs, and clubs are closed, let them close. Because a lot of them wouldn't contribute to the pension fund. Like if you were at the Village Vanguard for a week, they supposed to put money a certain point, and they been challenging them to do that for the last 20 years or so.
Wow.
And according to Jimmy Owens, who knows, because he's one of the leaders of the Jazz and Justice movement, they still haven't done it.
Wow. Incredible.
So a lot of times they use the musicians, and when they get sick, you know what I'm saying, or some misfortune occurs in their life, they become a nobody.
Yeah.
That's why the Jazz found, and they have to raise money to bury. Like I started the book talking about the Blue Mitchell tribute that we went to in June of 1979. And that was money to defray the cost of his medical expenses and his burial. This is Blue Mitchell.
Wow.
This is one of the greatest trumpet players in the history of my music. Why they have to take up a collection for him when he died? And the same with Sam Jones. The list goes on and on. It was a consistent feature in the jazz community, as anybody in the 80s and 70s, how many benefits they've been through, because musicians didn't have enough money to, you know, pay for medical expenses first, and then after they died, they didn't have enough money to defray the cost of the funeral.
Your father, his name was George Joyner?
Yes.
And at some point, he converted to Islam and changed his name to Jamil Nasser. How did that affect his work? And I guess didn't affect his ability to take care of his family?
Well, I put it in the book that basically he said half of his work went out the window once he changed his name. And he would get random calls throughout the night saying, yo, you find your workload to pick up if you go back to that George Joyner name.
Wow. Incredible.
And I think, and I was telling you this on the phone, I think he strategically continued to use that name up until 1964. Because I'll give you an example. When I interviewed Monty Alexander, I didn't realize that he had played with my father before he was in Ahmed Jamal's group.
Oh, wow.
In fact, he said he was playing with him when he went to make the audition that night.
Wow.
And he met my father as George Joyner. Wow. I didn't know that.
Wow.
In 1963. So I think he finally started using that name about 64 on the album Naked City Theme, 1964.
Incredible. Do you feel that your father gets the respect and recognition he deserved from family, from community, and from a historian?
Well, I just gave you two examples of two people that was close to him that basically opposed the project. And it wasn't, it's not an opposition to me. He commissioned me to do this. This is about him.
So if not for you writing this book, and I remember you talking about the Google
Google his name, and that's all you would have, pretty much.
So now, when you Googled his name at a certain point, there was not a lot of information.
It's still not a lot. If you Google now, compared to 61,000 words that's in this book, that's nothing. That's not sufficient enough to encapsulate not only his legacy, but nobody else's. If you rely on Google to document your legacy, you're going to be in trouble. You never could have told me that we would be sitting here in 2020 with somebody like Freddie Hubbard, 12 years in the grave. There's not even a faint rumbling of a book on Freddie Hubbard.
Wow.
You got 3 books on Chet Baker. Chet Baker, I'll say it before, could not tie Freddie Hubbard's shoes on any day as a trumpet player or a composer.
Wow.
You just can't talk about his trumpet legacy. You got to talk about him as a composer. How is that? We got all these writers around here that graduate from school that's passionate about the music. Where are y'all?
Exactly. Real quick, because we just sake of time. Who are some of the people your father worked with? Right off the top. You don't have to name them all.
Let me I compiled a list here. Wow. Let me
You don't read the whole list, just give us some general names.
Tommy Flanagan, Freddie Hubbard, Phineas Newborn Jr., Ahmed Jamal, George Coleman, Harold Vick, Clifford Jordan, Randy Weston, Monty Alexander, Lou Donaldson, Pharoah Saunders,
John
Coltrane,
Monk.
Gene Abbins, Monk. It's almost like Sonny Clark, Donald Byrd.
I just wanted to give the world.
He was in the movie with Denzel Washington, the preacher's wife.
That's right.
Denzel Washington. If you see this club scene.
Yeah.
He told me he did a tour with Johnny Nash. The guy, I can see clearly.
Yeah.
He said he did a tour with him, but I was trying to look for the details on that, but maybe that's in that paperwork that's in storage. I'll be able to find
Real quick, you told me a story about, what's that song? that you said you.
Oh, you talking about bluesette?
Bluesette, the song,
Yeah.
the standard bluesette. Tell us this.
Well, it's funny because he always said that would have changed the whole entire economic landscape of our lives because it's one of the most recorded songs in jazz history. And he said that he was doing a gig on the West Coast with Phineas Newborn. And he was showing him the manuscript paper in the dressing room. And they went and played the concert, and they were sharing this dressing room with Toots Thielman. And he said, next thing you know, the manuscript paper was missing, and he heard the song. He called it the Duke of Winds, but when he heard it, the next time it was called Bluesette by Toots Thielman.
So your dad...
And I stole it back because I got Duke in the Whirlwind on this album.
Yeah.
It's based on the changes of Bluesette, so
Wow.
it was my effort. That's why I called it Duke in the Whirlwind.
So your father's claims or
Yes.
tells you that he wrote that song.
Yeah, and another thing he said he always wanted to talk. He never was able to meet with Toots Thielman or even encountered him to even ask him about that tune.
Wow.
In all those years.
Well, hopefully, man, what we're doing in this conversation is helping your dad's name get out to the world. People start researching him and looking at recordings that he's played on, and the narrative can change. And thanks to Upright Bass and what we're doing today to help get this word out, okay?
And another thing I have to add, because I came up under Amos Wilson, Dr. Ben, Dr. Hendrick Clark, and I noticed even when I was reading their books, even in New York City, I had to go to a certain part, maybe in Brooklyn or Harlem, to find their books. And they self-published because there was no question. They didn't even approach the major publishers.
Wow.
So we saw a lot of people doing this kind of effort to get there. Even in some of Dr. Ben's early books, they were cardboard covers.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I got to give a special shout-out to a friend I just lost last week that took me to see Dr. Ben for the first time. His name is Michael Welch. He just passed away. And he was the one that took me to a lot of jazz concerts in the 80s. And a lot of lectures. We saw
Wow.
Dr. Iverman Sertima, Dr. Ben, you name it.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So my father put me on the path because we were learning one thing in school, but they weren't talking about how the Moors civilized Europe, and there were other fine points of history. It was like, why are they leaving that out? And then next thing you know, my father taught me, and then Mike said, nah, it's not only the Moors, you could go back to ancient Egypt and Dr. Ben, and that just, and they were self-publishing.
Yeah. Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's the only way to information, and we have to do a lot more of it. If we're going to sit around and wait for other people to tell our history, we're going to be short. Wow. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully, one of the reasons I wrote this book also is to encourage the sons and daughters of other musicians, don't wait for the publishing establishment to green light you telling your father's story. You better collect those contracts, those letters, and try to publish something, or they can and will be forgotten, no matter how great they are.
And on that note, we're gonna move along. I want to talk about this section is called the X generation.
Wow.
Okay. We are called our generation.
Yes.
We were called the X generation.
Yes.
And you know, the older I get, and I think about that, and I look at just how the world is moving and how the society is moving. Do you ever get the feeling that they're trying to X us out?
Yes. Because I'm born in 1967. Look at what was going on then. There was 100 riots in America, the Vietnam War, people were asking for change. And so our generation was supposed to be the first generation beneficiaries of whatever change was coming.
Wow.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then in our time, we're connecting with people that were actually in that movement.
Wow.
And they taught us certain things. And so we're strategically positioned between the old world and the new world.
Exactly. And you know,
we're the bridge between the two.
And in a way, we've had to endure such change. I remember we didn't come up with cell phones. We didn't come up with, we had to learn internet and email.
Yes.
And so we saw the world shift. And now we're going through this thing called this pandemic.
COVID-19.
Now we're seeing another shift. So we're going through all these 9/11. And so...
Well, wait a minute. Let's roll back to... First of all, we had to survive the onslaught of crack.
Oh...
we were going to jam sessions in D.C. around here, and we had to strategically plan our route so we wouldn't go through them neighborhoods where they all
D.C. was the murder capital at that time.
And if you don't believe it, it's on YouTube. Go look at the special reports from 1989 and 90 and see what was going on in this town.
Wow.
When we were developing and going out 2 o'clock in the morning to try to learn this music. We were taking our lives in our hands.
So how important is it for our generation, the X generation, well, I'm gonna call the young lion generation, because we also, and we're gonna talk about the young lion.
Yes.
How important is it for us to carry on the torch, being that we got to see some. I got to see Hank Mobley.
Right.
I got to see Miles Davis, Art Blakey. Who you name some of the
Yeah, I
musicians
mean,
you say.
I saw Dizzy Gillespie, Roy Eldridge.
Yeah,
I
wow.
saw Joe Newman and Howard McGee.
Papa Joe Jones.
Papa Joe Jones. I talked to him
man.
for 6 hours. I met Hank Mobley.
Wow.
Tommy Flanagan, Barry Harris. I mean, the list just goes. Woody Shaw. I've seen Woody Shaw many times.
Yeah, wow.
And so, and got to talk to these people and meet them.
And that's another thing, man. What I don't see in this young generation, man. I would always ask questions. Like I said, I like to ask questions.
Yes.
And we're gonna talk about the story when we saw Freddie Hubbard.
Yes.
And we went backstage and
Yes.
talked to him. But we used to ask questions. I remember going to a jam session in Philly, 40th and Market, and I was in high school. They would let me sit in on a song, and all Bootsy Barnes and all the cats were leading the jam sessions, and I was learning, watching this and observing.
Yes.
And and the cat said, that is right there. He said, man, that's Hank Mobley.
Wow.
Hank Mobley was playing on one lung. You know what I'm saying? And you could barely hear him, but at the time I was in the Bird, so I was like, okay, Hank Mobley. And he actually came over, and he saw me with my case, and he came over to me and said, can you play that thing? I said, yeah.
Wow.
But having that connection, and given that a lot of our masters are dying, how important is it that our generation, the X generation,
Yes.
become the leaders, because they wanted to X us out.
Right.
But I think, and some people are doing great things in our generation. You got Sonny Sumter. She's
Yes.
the executive director of the DC Jazz Festival, and we went to Howard together. So people are doing, but how important is it for us to begin to take the leadership?
Like I said, we're a bridge because you talked to Dizzy Gillespie.
Yes.
Who else is behind you is going to get that chance?
Wow.
You asked Freddie Hubbard a question direct, not something you read in a book
Let's talk
or
about that.
interview.
Yeah.
Okay, when I first came to town, they kept telling about a story. This happened May 1971. Jazz and Survival. I'm going to get the flyer because Norval is, I hope it's still in his house. I have to ask his daughter. He passed on, but his daughter still has access probably to it. And so they had Freddie Hubbard and Lee Morgan. Mm-hmm. But see, Lee Morgan was coming out of an obscure period. Freddie Hubbard had First Light. He had Red Clay, so he was popular. Mm-hmm. So people didn't really, they knew who Lee Morgan was more from a historical standpoint because he was just, trying to get himself together with that addiction, fighting that addiction to heroin and all that. So they said that Lee Morgan opened, because, Freddie was like the headliner. They said he blew the house down, man.
Wow.
And Norval told me this. Norval was born 1922. He saw Bird. He heard Freddie Webster in 1939.
Wow.
I mean, he's heard jazz, like you couldn't imagine, right, from the masters. And he talked about this for 30. He mentioned this at least 30 or 40 times in the time I known him. That's the concert that he talked about most was this one. And he said, man, Freddie blew. He said it was like church in there. People screamed.
You mean Lee?
Lee, sorry. Lee Morgan played. Said people jumped up. They screamed. He said Freddie Hubbard came out. He tried to play high notes. He tried to play. They was like, no, bring Lee back.
Wow.
Lee Morgan had to come out and play with him.
Wow.
At the crowd's insistence.
So let's get to
And so I wondered about it. I like to ask questions, but there's certain questions I wouldn't ask, especially somebody like Freddie Hubbard, because he was known to be volatile and go off on the cat, man. They came at him sideways. And so when you just walked up in 2001, this is 30 years. Now we're from 1971 to 2001. And we're at the...
We're at
the
Birchmere.
In
Virginia.
Birchmere, Virginia. And so Antonio just walks up to Freddie Hubbard. Hey, man, so what happened with you and Lee Morgan? At Crampton Auditorium. And Freddie Hubbard didn't scratch his head. He didn't pretend perplexity. He said, oh, Lee Morgan just got me that night. And I was like, damn. And that was the first time I actually heard the principal.
Yeah.
Not the sideman, not the piano player, but the actual one that was in the trumpet battle with Lee Morgan. He confirmed it.
Wow.
And that was major for me, man. Because I wouldn't have asked that question. I mean, you just catched it, man. What happened?
That's what I do.
The blue.
That's what I do, baby.
But think about this, though. just the kind of memories that musicians have. Because I remember I have a story about Sonny Rollins firing my father and them. And I asked Roy Haynes about it in 2010. This something happened in 57. He said, "Oh yeah, it happened." He said the only thing I could remember, only thing I couldn't remember was that Gil Coggins was on piano.
Wow. So let's move on because we ain't got a lot of time. Okay, real quick. Quick answers. How would you define jazz?
Ooh, I would define it similar to how Duke Ellington, that it has to have a swing and a pulse.
It don't mean a thing.
Okay. Yeah, you got to have a groove, and then there's just the syncopation and the beautiful melodies and the creativity and improvisation.
So some people have a problem with the term jazz. I remember one of the definitions I've heard it called that someone in Philly. He called it African American music, classical music, otherwise known as jazz. So then you have Nicholas Payton. Let's talk about Nicholas Payton. He started the band movement, Black American music.
Yes.
What's your opinion of Nicholas Payton and his band?
Well, I take my hat off to his trumpet playing, but first of all, black is an adjective. Ooh. It describes, it doesn't name.
Okay.
So a lot of times, I mean, if you're going to be a musician and you're going to study chord changes and the history, then if you're going to go over to writing and scholarship, you have to share just as much in that area as you do in the music. Okay. So Wynton's read the books, he's studied, he's had the debate.
And I'm assuming that Nicholas has done that too.
Not as much as Wynton. I can see him inching in that direction. He's doing pretty good. Yeah. But black is, like I said, it's an adjective. It describes, it doesn't name.
So do you understand the motive or what he's trying?
Yeah, but it's just. Look how many places jazz has been written in books and magazines. Yeah. So how are you going to place BAM by each one of those terms? Think out of the millions of times jazz has been. How are you going to compete with that? Playing piano and trumpet on the bandstand if you're not writing. And I'm not talking about blogs. Blogs come and go. If you're not writing a book, because jazz is codified in books, not just in blogs online. If you're really going to compete with that, you have to do a lot more writing. Yeah. Volumes and volumes of writing.
Speaking of Wynton Marsalis, he's, he is the, I guess what would I call him? He ignited the Young Lions generation. I remember Wynton Marsalis in high school. In fact, when I first met Wynton, and Wynton would have you take out your horn and play something for him. And, at the time, I was just learning, and I think I was just trying to play some bird licks and, just trying to show off. And he said, man, he gave me a compliment. He did say, man, you got a soulful sound. He said, man, you're not serious. And man, I got a picture. Somebody took a picture, and I'm literally holding back tears, man, because what you mean I'm not serious? Wow. I understand what he's talking about now, but at the time, man, I'm like, this is what I want to do. What you mean I'm not serious? Right. I just didn't know what he was talking about at the time. But anyway, other than that, man, we all looked up to Wynton at that time. He came on the scene as a young cat, man, and I'm talking about the Black Codes Wynton with his brother and all that, man, and he was a phenom. It was like, now it was a lot of controversy about him and Miles and that sort of thing. What's your impression of Wynton and his and where does he stand in the pantheon of jazz?
Well, it's like I just noticed going to a lot of the jazz concerts, it was rare to see a young person playing. Not saying there weren't young people playing jazz, but qualified enough to be on the stage with the masters. I saw Ricky Ford. He was 24 up there with my father put him up there with George Coleman. As the Dean Weston, Randy Weston's son, played with Ahmad. He played with Dizzy Gillespie. When I went to see Dizzy Gillespie, he was on. And John Faddis. Wow. You see what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden...
What about Wallace Roney?
Wallace wasn't, at this time, wasn't that visible. He was just kind of trying to break into the... Okay. We talking about the late 70s, early 80s. Okay. So all of a sudden, when Marsalis came along, it was like, whoa. You know what I'm saying? So I was playing him... And he could play. He was sounding good. He could play classical. He was dressed clean. He was articulate. And he just made me aware of the fact that maybe it is possible to have a career in jazz.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And he was drug-free.
Wow.
That's a major point.
Yeah.
He was clean, sober, well-spoken.
And people criticize Wynton, man, but you can't help but get his cat respect. He's a personification of excellence, jazz, of excellence, period.
Exactly.
His writing, I went to see Blood on the Fields.
Yes.
Man, I mean, he received a lot of criticism, I guess, what he said about Miles and being a purist and that sort of thing. But, man, you know, and now he's with the Lincoln Center,
Right.
Jazz Orchestra. And you might disagree with some of his concepts, whatever, man, but I got a number of respect for Wynton and the Marsalis family.
Yes.
Because you can't just say Wynton Marsalis without including the family. And we just lost his dad,
right.
Mr. Ellis.
Ellis Marsalis, yes.
Yeah. And so, rest in peace, Ellis. But, man, yeah, Wynton Marsalis. I remember Wynton would come, man, and he would work with young people. And and I believe some people are chosen. I really believe that some people were called for certain things. Because then right after Wynton, we had this young cat named Roy Hargrove. And
another thing about Wynton, you mentioned it yesterday. We went to Blues Alley. We didn't have to pay a dime.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about that.
And then he let us all come on stage and play.
Yes.
And he was the biggest star at the time in jazz.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other people that came to Blues Alley, some of them I have history with, some of them my father know, they never asked me, hey, come play Mary Had a Little Lamb.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Come play a chorus of a blues on the last song.
We were piled in a car.
Yes.
Somebody had a car while we were college students.
Yes.
And we would wait just outside because we didn't have no money to get in. Wynton would come to the door and say, let him in.
Right. Yeah.
And then, man, there are times he would let us come sit in.
Yeah, that was great.
And you know, man.
You need that kind of encouragement and leg up for somebody that's doing it, that's out there.
And then after the gig, you got young cats that would come up and he would pull out so, man, you got to get this cat his props, man. I agree with you on that. You got to give him that love, man.
Yes.
And so.
And the thing I don't understand, because I can remember my father and people in this generation, man, there's not enough young people playing this music. We got to get our young cats, especially our young African Americans. In particular, we want to see a lot of more y'all getting into music. I know y'all into the disco and rap. Then when these cats started playing, it was a problem all of a sudden. Oh, they haven't paid their dues. They're not playing the chain. They don't sound like Clifford Brown. They ain't better than Miles. Oh, he got holes in his playing.
We're going to talk about that too.
But it's like, you got to ask, like, how many have you helped? If you're going to criticize somebody, show me your students.
Wow.
Where's the people you have? I mean, it's easy to sit back and criticize. He ain't got this. But as you're registering that criticism, ask yourself how many people you've taught and helped.
Wow.
Because a lot of these musicians, they go in the dressing room or after the concert, they don't want to see you. They're not going to tell you nothing. They're going to close that door. You know, I remember we was waiting for one guy, I won't mention his name, well, Charles Lloyd, he never came out the room. I wanted to meet him. We sat out Blues Out. I remember Billy Higgins was there. Because he grew up with my father in Memphis. Man, we sat out that door for about an hour.
Wow.
And then we left.
Let's talk about the young lion, Mr. Roy Hargrove. He was another just an iconic kind of figure, man. I met Roy in high school at the when I was in high school, they had it was a festival. I can't even, when you get old, you start losing it. But in the downbeat competition in Chicago.
Wow.
And you know, I'm in a band with Christian McBride, Joe DeFrancesco, you know, and you know.
So y'all all played together?
Yeah, we was in the Philadelphia All City Jazz Band.
Damn.
And you had bands from different places.
Right.
And I think Roy's, they were coming from out of Dallas, Dallas. Anyway, and I remember this because in the middle of my solo, I'm soloing, my horn just breaks apart. I mean, it springs off in the middle of my solo.
Oh, shoot. Wow.
In the middle of my solo, and I had to borrow somebody's horn to complete because it was like an adjudication kind of thing. And I mean, the keys just fell off my horn, man.
Crazy.
So and we got Christian McBride in the band, who was another young lion, Joe DeFrancesco. And we're gonna talk about those cats.
Wow.
And then, man, I heard this cat, man, with Roy Hargrove I think they were coming from Dallas, man. And when he played, everybody went,
oh, shoot.
Because he had like an old soul, man. It was like this cat had it all together. Right. I mean, he had a Lee Morgan thing. He had the Dizzy. I mean, you get the bebop.
Right.
He had soul.
Right.
And man, it was like, whoa. And then that summer, we were in New York together. I think it was the NAACP competitions.
Dang.
I was coming from Philly. I guess he was coming from Dallas. And we were playing on a corner. So it was a beautiful thing. I think at the downbeat comp, I think you had Bruce Williams, like the cats that you know, Russell Gunn. So it was a lot of cats, man, that there, man, young guys. And it was just a beautiful thing.
But you know how I first heard of Roy? Sheldon Wright.
Sheldon.
We're sitting in Sutton Plaza. He kept saying, and Sheldon's from Dallas. You gotta hear my boy. You gotta hear my boy.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody said, I was like, yeah, right, okay. And then I remember he said, well, Roy's in town because he had a girlfriend at Howard.
Yeah.
I forgot her name.
And Roy would come up on campus. Yeah.
And so he said, well, Roy's in town. So me and you went to the Ramada Inn right there off of 14th Street, and we picked him up and went to Twins. And that boy picked that horn and started playing. I said,
and that's the beautiful thing.
I'm sitting there like this. Really?
And that's the beautiful thing.
He raised the bar because we were kind of playing the music somewhat, but he was like, "This is the level."
And he was full of confidence.
Yeah.
I mean, he was just.
Yeah.
And
that blew my mind, man.
Yeah. He hurt some feelings. Roy. Yeah. And you know what I really love about Roy, man? His playing grew over time. Like when you listen to him, he's always had that thing.
But another thing that impressed me about Roy, this cat would walk off of Kennedy Center stage or Blues and come right to a jam session. And guess what? He wouldn't leave until it was over.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cats around here and they got the wrong idea. If you think you can learn this music from going to a gig and then driving back out to the suburbs and not hanging out, you got the wrong idea.
Yeah, we're gonna talk
My
about
father said in the book, they learned from jam sessions. They couldn't, the gig was to eat.
Yeah.
They said the real stuff, and they had jam sessions that lasted 3 days. They played in shifts.
Wow.
That's how, when you're looking at Lee Morgan at 23, that's how they got to that level.
Wow.
They put a lot of time in.
Tell us about the story about you. I think your son was in the car, and you were driving Roy. Y'all took him, and many of those people are not no longer.
Well, it was funny because you did the concert. That's when you did the concert.
I did the. Let me tell the people. Yeah, I was the president of Fine Arts Student Council. I'm glad you remind me of that. And I put on a concert called The Young Lions. And in my mind, I said, I'm gonna put all these cats together. At the time, I had Alan Palmer on piano. I had Christian McBride on bass, Aaron Walker on drums, Roy Hargrove on trumpet, Tim Warfield on tenor, and Robert Landon on alto. And I put that thing together, man. And it was called The Young Lions. And guess what? Tim told me shortly after that concert, they started the Future.
Yeah, that did come out. Yeah.
So that might have helped influence that thing.
Connection.
So I'm a part of the.
Dale was there.
Don't leave. I'm part of this Young Lion thing. Lee told me
Dale Fitzgerald was in the audience.
Really?
Because I was gonna say the story you get into from there.
Really, I didn't know that.
It was me, Roy, Dale Fitzgerald, and our good friend Levi that passed away 10 years ago. I drove them from Howard down to Freedom Plaza.
And your son was in the car?
No. His car seat was in the car.
Okay,
This was night. He was a.
So you drove them after that?
Yeah, I drove them. We drove to Freedom Plaza, and
none
I'm
of those...
the only one alive.
Wow.
Yeah, they all dead. There was 4 of us in the car.
Wow.
And 1 of us remains here.
So I want to ask you, how did Roy Hargrove's death affect
you? Roy, and I always tell this, I'm really honest when I'm speaking. Sometimes I met Roy in '88, but every time subsequent to that, what was that? No, that was not. That was '89, I think, when he came. That's right before he was on his way to do his first record. But I never really. Sometimes I didn't know if he knew me or not. And I found out he was like that with a lot of people that he knew over time. Just kind of standoff. He has a quirky personality. Yeah. And I remember the last time I saw Roy was August 22nd. 2011.
Wow.
I had just come from Dallas.
And you gave him a book.
Yes. I had just come from Dallas, and I had never been to Dallas the only time I knew him. And so I'm going to Smalls. It was at the Washington Square Hotel. I said, let me go to the jam session. I'm walking. Who do I see like maybe 10 feet in front of me walking down the stairs at Smalls? It's Roy.
Wow.
So I went down, and it was basically we played Star Eyes, and then the owner wanted Roy to play something by himself. And I actually taped that. It was a duet.
Okay.
I Wish I Knew. They played a duet on that. And so we went outside, and at first I was going to go back to the hotel. You know what I'm saying? I said, man, sometimes Roy be on that, that celebrity's ego stuff. I ain't gonna mess with him tonight. And my inner voice, something deep in my voice said, no, turn around and go give Roy a book.
Wow.
I mean, it was a command. So I actually did a 360, went there, and Roy was there. I gave him a book, and we talked for about, that's the longest conversation I ever had with him. We talked for about 2.5 hours.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he told me, I didn't realize that how much he admired Zayd. He said, man, we used to sit down, when I first came to New York, we go to small, and Zayd was playing like bebop. He said, he used to blow my mind.
And you know, he played on I did a funk album called Planetary. And man, I called Roy, I said, Roy, man, can I get you on the... And he was great. He always was cool with me for some reason.
Yeah.
We always just had
he loved you.
And man, and that may be the last recording he played. This was 2000. Wow. The recording came out 2016.
Man.
And so he played 3 cuts, man, and I'm just, you know, that's my boy, man.
Wow.
That's, you know, so, yeah, man, rest in peace, Mr.
And the thing about, to me, in my opinion, you look at all the people that came along at that time, he seemed to just rise above the heap and stay there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know, he had the look, he had the swag.
Yeah.
Because now the image of jazz is like kind of
girls.
stiff. The girl, yeah. You know, the image of jazz... Well, another thing that brought me to jazz was like, those guys were cool.
Yeah.
Man, you see Freddie Hubbard walking the blue, he had a nice suit on, I was like, man, these cats it was a hipness that they had and a swag. And it wasn't a fake. It was real. Yeah. It wasn't them trying to be cool. It was natural.
I can't talk about the Young Lions and not talk about my homeboys from Philly, and that is Mr. Christian McBride and Joe DeFrancesco. I was these 2 young men. Man,
I gotta throw in the drummer though, Byron Landon.
You always like Byron Landon.
Man, that cat.
But you know, I went to high school with Christian McBride, and Joe DeFrancesco, man. And man, as a young guy, those guys had something special. You know, I was trying to figure it out.
Right.
You know, and both of their parents are musicians, by the way.
Wow.
And so I think some of that stuff gets passed down, but. Man, just to see their careers, man, I'm so happy to be a part of that.
Right.
And like Christian McBride, I think he's become the face of jazz. And next to Wynton,
yes,
you know, he's doing like incredible things. And in fact, man, I say, McBride, man, when you and Joey gonna do something together? And I think he has a big band album featuring Joey DeFrancesco. So shout out to Philly, Christian McBride, Joe DeFrancesco, the Creative Performing Arts High School in Philadelphia. I just want to show my love, you did? Go ahead.
But now with bass players, think of Ron Carter. Ron Carter's on over 2,000, maybe 3,000 recordings. He just self-published his book in 2009.
Wow.
And so bass players, I don't care how good they are, they don't get this. You know what I'm saying? Go look on Amazon and see how many books you see with a bass player on the cover.
Did you give Christian McBride a book too?
Yes, I did. They don't get this kind of PR.
Good.
You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
A lot of times, this is reserved for the horn players. Just go look on Amazon and see how many covers you see with a bass on it.
Real quick, man, because I know we're out of time. We came up at a great time. I mean, Spike Lee, Mo Better Blues. We got Wynton. We got this resurgence of young.
Man.
You know, then around in the middle '90s, man, we started losing jazz stations. We started losing, like, record companies start cutting their jazz.
Jazz Sing the Blues in D.C., May 2nd, 1997.
Wow.
This details the closing of One Step Down and the folding
Clubs
of the radio station.
Yeah, and the jazz, we lost. And this was happening around in different parts of the world. I think Philly, they cut their jazz programming around that time. So it was like, and then, you know, here come this gangster rap and all this like, even our rap, you know, you had to feel self-destruction, fight the power.
Right.
There was a lot, it was like a positive cultural revolution during that time. And all of a sudden,
rolling down the street,
exactly.
smoking Indo, sipping on gin and juice, laid back.
And I think this was intentionally done. This is just my opinion. But East Coast, West Coast rival. Lost Tupac, lost Biggie.
Yeah.
You know, jazz. You know, Wynton even got, I think, cut out of Columbia Records.
Yes.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers dropped the whole jazz roster.
Yeah. And so, man, I'm like, whoa.
You didn't see jazz on TV. No, my memory was jazz at Lincoln Center.
Then we lost, at some time we lost Tower Records.
Yeah.
Then the IJE, I think it was 2000. Yeah. And so, man, I'm like.
Jazz Times almost closed.
Yeah, so it's like, man, and recently I'm hearing you can't play jazz in New York or something, or you can't play live music. I don't know, man. I don't. What's up? And so now you see all this, WAP,
Oh boy.
And you see all this stuff getting and it goes back to what I'm talking about. They want to highlight the lower aspect of our culture.
Yes.
And here we are, man, with all this history you providing today. And we fighting to get some love. And that's why I think we're having this conversation.
And then we have to, they made the bottom to top. Everything our parents told us not to do in terms of cursing, dressing in a way that's without dignity and class, all cursing, disrespecting elders, they rewarded those people.
Wow.
And we the ones that kind of suffered, had to struggle along and work different jobs and get a gig here and then try to raise families and struggle through
and not only,
with no acknowledgement.
And not only that, man, another thing we had, the music industry changed on us. I thought I was going, I said, well, I need to produce. Let me get it. So I started, and all of a sudden now Napster, now everybody's producer, man. Everybody's producing CD. It used to be something special to have your own CD.
Yeah.
And now everybody, and so it lost the luster, And they used to have jazz on the Grammys. I remember that.
They used to have jazz on TV.
Yeah. And so I'm like, man.
It's a visible music. You can't, and my problem is, everybody's on Facebook playing around, and this is the thing my father did, getting back to him. It was another mission. It was like, we got to own the clubs, we got to own our music, and so we not even considering, we just trying to play in the same clubs. They trying to get out. They didn't like those clubs. They were fed dog food. They were disrespected. They were told they couldn't talk to the patron. Some of them had to walk in the back door. They told the bass players they couldn't use the bow. All kind of indignities. They're not going to tell you because they got to appear to be stars and appear to be well-respected personalities.
So we're going to wind this down because I know we're out of time. But now the universities have taken up the mantle of producing a lot of wonderful jazz artists coming out of colleges and universities. But I think they're focusing more on the music, not the culture. Not, when they sell hip-hop, they don't just sell hip-hop as rap or it's a culture. It's the dress, the
language.
It's the the lingo. It's the swag. It's the and jazz was that at one time.
Yes.
I mean, they had the nicknames. And so my thing, what I want to talk about real briefly is what do you think about these young people coming out of the universities? Are they missing something?
Well, it's funny that we could use our own example. I was studying music at Howard. I was an international business major. And y'all told me that I'm the only one that y'all see at the jam sessions that's in the jazz band. None of the people from the jazz band would come to the jam except for you, Aaron, and a couple other people.
Wow.
You never saw those cats. So they felt like that was enough.
Wow.
But then some of those people, I won't mention their names, they were jealous of Roy. But Roy was putting in the time. He went to Berkeley. He went to the new school, but he was going to the jam sessions.
And in fact, let me tell you a story about Roy. One time we was playing at the Jazz and the Punch. At Howard, they had this thing called Jazz and Poetry in the Punch Out. So one time, we had a Kevin Levi, we was playing. And in come who? And at the time, Roy was going to Berkeley. Roy Hargrove, Delfeo Marsalis, Antonio Hart, and the crew. And they just pulled out their horns and just got on this. They didn't even ask.
Oh, shoot.
And man, but I guess they thought they was gonna come and teach these teach these Howard cats something. But it raised our level. Kevin thought, man, we went deep, bro. We got our respect. I asked Delfeo about that. He remembers that. But man, that was one of the stories. And we're gonna close out. Because we probably running out of time. But the stories. And I think it's important that that's why I call this a conversation in jazz, because I think that we have to tell the stories. In the African tradition, there was the griot, and the African-American tradition, we have the griot, and they passed information through storytelling.
Yes.
And so it's more than music. That's why we have to ask questions.
Yes.
Because we got to get these stories. The stories inspire. The stories inform. You know what I'm saying? And the stories, and then you begin to have your own stories. And so how important is it for us to begin getting the stories, because a lot of these cats are taking these stories to the grave.
Now, that's very important, but here's one caveat we have to observe in analyzing history. We like to celebrate history. We like to go to history using it as a means to buttress our sagging self-esteem and egos. That's called celebration. What we need to do is analyze. You know what I'm saying? Like, I made some critical observations here today that most likely at a certain time would have been edited out because you don't want to hurt nobody's feelings. You don't want to step nobody. Other people deserve a certain respect that you don't. They're somebody and you're nobody.
Yeah.
So you don't talk about them. You don't criticize them. I say the hell with that shit. I say what I want to. You know what I'm saying? We all equal. There's a grave for you like there is for me.
We have a story too. Everybody has a story, and although we celebrate the masters, and we revere their stories and the things that we learn, we also have a story, and we have to begin sharing our story.
But we gotta know. We have to take the good and the bad. Just don't try to go to the good stories.
Yeah,
we need the good and the bad. We need the stuff that's uncomfortable, unpleasant to talk about it. Put it all on the table because there's a lesson in that too, not in the good stuff. A lot of time we try to edit out. Like I took y'all in our house. Some of the things I said here today, I'll be called on carpet, and a lot of people won't like that. What some of the things I said, even in the book, but there's lessons in that,
Good.
And the lessons exceed whatever value it is in protecting people's ego and feelings. Because y'all about to die, y'all ain't gonna be here to have no feelings anyway.
Exactly.
But the next generation has to learn these lessons, whether y'all here or not.
And on that note, I want to thank you.
Yes, sir.
For
my pleasure.
For this conversation, a conversation in jazz.
Hopefully, and remember, do the right thing.
Yes, and tell the people how to get
right.
Help tell the people how they can get your upright bass and a soldier story.
Okay, please. www.jamilsnasser.com. I'm gonna make it simple for you. You can buy the book and CD right at that particular website. I also have MuneerNassermusic.com.
All right.
And please, we need the support. I want to be able to encourage other people to take on projects like this, but there has to be a award. Like you said, the rappers get an award. Cardi B just made WAP. She's making money. And then we come and do something like this, and we got to count pennies. And I want to be able to encourage people to continue this work. And so it has to be a reward structure to this type of work.
And we also want to ask some of our organizations in the area and outside the area, as you heard today, this brother has a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of information he can share to keep this music moving forward, to pass the stories. He's a griot. He's a griot. I'm going to call you the griot now.
And one more thing can I say?
Come on.
Add to that, I saved and reserved certain talk points that I didn't put in this book. I reserved them for talk points. So if you invite me to talk, to lecture, to speak, you'll get them. If not, those will be going to the grave with me. Maybe.
Yeah. And also, put some dollars in his pocket, because these things cost money. As artists and independent producers, publishers, we have to make a living. We have, and that sort of thing. So I just want to, again.
And let's put a figure with that. That cost me about $13,000 to do.
Okay.
For my own, just to give you a figure. For people talking about writing books. And now you could throw out something cheap without all the processing.
All right, let me close it out, baby.
If you're going to do it right, you're going to spend some money. Okay.
All right, let me close it out. Yes. All right, so thank you for listening. I'm Antonio Parker, and our special guest is Mr. Muneer Nasser.
Thank you.
And this is a conversation in jazz. Take care.
Thank you for having me.